Hopefully you'll get a lot of hints and tips, which will then help you with further sessions that we will be delivering over the next course of the next few days. Thank you.
Okay, thanks Lindsay. Just to let you know, this session is being recorded, so you will be able to watch it after the session. If there's anything you want to go back to, anything you want to remind yourself of, please do use the chat box. So post your questions up and we will be really happy to try and answer them. So this session runs until 11:15. And then tomorrow there'll be more sessions which you can sign up for on our Grad Futures portal. So I think just trying to get the slides to work. Right, okay. So when you reach the point where you're leaving university and moving on to your next steps, it can feel, well, you are moving into a completely new world, a new environment for many of you. And I think we all hear a lot in the background about how the world of work has changed. And that can be quite a daunting prospect when we're moving into something that is a little unknown. I'm going to try and demystify some of these things that people do worry about, and also sort of recognise how the past year and COVID has impacted on the working environment. But I think it's really important right at the start to remind yourself that you are incredibly well equipped for the next stages. Sometimes because it's a divide from where you are now to where you want to be, it can seem as though you're not quite ready yet, or you're not quite you're at that point. But be rest assured, all the students who have gone and the graduates who have gone, you have had this attachment from where they are moving to. It's quite normal, and there's often a sense of sort of imposter syndrome where you worry about, am I good enough? Am I going to be able to stand my own in this new environment? You will get through, you will adapt, and the skills that you have gained at university and over the last few years will stand you in really good stead for moving into the world of work. Just very quickly, a few sort of things that have been talked about for years, and now we're really starting to see these things come into play. So on a global scale, I've been a careers consultant for quite some years, and I can remember when things like this were talked about but not actually being practiced. Whereas now all of these things we are actually seeing in reality. The importance of skilling. Learning doesn't end with, and there can be straight into kind of formal training to gain some professional qualifications, but your upskilling will be much broader than that, and organisations will train you in ways which are far more diverse. Previously you would have been sent on a training course or enrolled in a formal course of study, whereas these days your learning happens all the time on the job. There's constant reflection, there's constant thinking about what your learning needs are and addressing those, both informally through sort of informal training structures, but also logging into things like LinkedIn Learning and online courses. So the learning doesn't stop. So having that mindset as a student is really helpful. The sort of skills that employers say that they want, and Lindsay will continue with this theme after I've finished, they are reporting strong demand for digital skills, creativity, critical thinking, interpersonal skills, leadership skills. These are right across the board. These aren't specific to particular industries. And that's why we call them mobility skills, because these are core skills that you can then take to other industries or other roles. And this isn't an exclusive list. There are more skills than this that employers are looking for. But when you think back to your student experience, many of these will be the skills that you have been developing. Critical thinking, problem solving, dealing with texts and making decisions. Leadership skills, if you've been involved in any student organisations or perhaps worked in teams or small groups on your course, you will be able to evidence all of these skills, and that will be really important for your future progression in work. The rise in smart machines, so computers very much used to be a tool that we would use to help us to do their job. Now they're more of a status almost of a colleague who does some of the tough stuff, and they augment what we do. But what employers really want from us is that those human qualities. There's ability to to empathise, to make value-based judgments, to communicate effectively. So understanding how AI and how technology works in the world of work can really help us to do our jobs much more effectively. You might have heard the expression flatter, faster, leaner, which I think was coined by McKinsey's sort of management consultancy to describe the future of how organisations look. Previously, graduates, even sort of 10, 15 years ago, would have gone into organisations and would have climbed a sort of ladder, a hierarchical structure. We're now seeing much flatter organisations, and what that means is there's fewer people in the middle of the management structure, but it does mean that everybody gets much more involved in the decision making. So your autonomy and your opinion are important. You are trusted with decisions often in the workplace at a much earlier stage. These decisions are made more quickly, and we've definitely seen that with COVID, with people working remotely, that a lot of the big meetings, the sort of slow processes have been taken out of the workplace. Things move a little bit faster, and there's reduced costs, which employers, of course, will absolutely love, because reduced costs means increased profitability. It might also mean that they can reward their staff better as well. So reduced costs can be a positive for everybody, but of course it's very organisational dependent. And finally, people will actively seek work that gives them a sense of purpose. And there will be more opportunities in things like green technology, for example, where we're predicted to have a threefold increase in the number of jobs in sort of carbon capture, in conservation, in environmental work. So that's going to be a big growth area that we know a lot of our graduates really want to go into. But at the same time, it's also about employers having values that resonate with you. So, placing diversity at the heart of what they do, thinking about sort of their supply chains and so on, but also doing work that feels that it is contributing something, and there's a definite trend towards people feeling that they want to contribute something and give something back to society. So these are just some of the changes, some of the main changes that we are seeing globally anyway, even without COVID. But some things have been exacerbated by COVID. And I want to just focus in on some of the key impacts of COVID on the graduate job search and what your experience is likely to be. Now, some of this is fairly self-explanatory. But just wanted to run through a few points. If you've got questions about any of this, please do ask them. But throughout this week, we will be referring to things like the job application process, online job search, sort of job search in a challenging market. So there's going to be lots more input around this sort of topic. So one of the things that we immediately saw last year was that recruitment declined sharply in the graduate market, in everything else as well, in many sectors. A few sectors were less affected, for example, health, quite obviously. But recruitment in terms of graduate job vacancies went down by about 12%. So that was quite a sharp decline, the biggest decline since 2008. The good news is that has been increased this year. We are starting to climb back, but we are nowhere near the 2019 levels quite yet. And at the same time, the top employers, and by top I mean the employers that recruit large numbers of graduates, perhaps hundreds of graduates every year, they reported receiving 41% more job applications in this session, the 2020-21 session, compared to the previous year. So there were a lot more people, a lot more graduates and final year students applying for work in that period to those particular organisations. Now it's hard to know what that's down to. Part of it will be that people are feeling sort of generally more anxious and concerned and really want to make sure that they get on board with their job applications. Perhaps people who are going to take a year out, perhaps go travelling, of course that is off the table. So there are lots of factors that have impacted on the increase in competition for some of these jobs. And that can seem like really bad news, but I'm going to give you some good news as well. So we will come to that in a moment. Employers have also switched almost all their recruitment activity online. Every now and again, myself and my colleagues have somebody come and see us and they tell us that they've got a live interview. It happens about once a month, I think, at the moment. It's very unusual to have a live interview, but that does require you to be really switched on around all the online recruitment sort of services, to understand things like video interviews, and you might be doing a virtual assessment centre. But it also means that it's really important for you to have an online presence. So, for example, to have a LinkedIn profile and to make sure it's 100% up to date and complete, because that may be forming part of the recruitment process. So they may be looking at people's LinkedIn profiles and taking that into account when they consider your application. So being really up to date and really comfortable with the online process is also really important. We're talking to employers all the time, and they are not going to switch back from virtual anytime soon. In a lot of ways, it works much more effectively for them. I was talking to one of the large recruiters who said that one of the really practical things about this for them was previously when they were organising an assessment centre, they would have to book space in a hotel sort of function room, and then they would have to organise invitations and travel. Whereas now, if they want to put on an extra assessment centre, they just book it online and send out the invites, and it just happens. So it's more cost effective, it's more efficient, and actually the feedback from the participants has been pretty positive, that they are enjoying that process as well. So we can give you lots of advice and information and help on managing that process. So do take advantage of that. I think it's also important to acknowledge that there has been an impact on things like part-time temporary jobs and also internships and placements. So previously, you may have planned to do an internship in your penultimate year. Perhaps you are building up some experience through part-time work, and it has been much harder to make that work. And of course, face-to-face internships have been really tricky. I think if you're in that place, of course, it's really disappointing if you've had an internship cancelled, or you haven't been able to secure what you wanted and what you were hoping for because of COVID. But employers are being quite pragmatic about that. And this is where it's really important to be able to evidence not just your skills, but also your interest in a particular industry. By doing your research, by really understanding the industry that you're moving towards, by really researching the employer, but also by doing a skills audit and understanding how you can convince employers you do have all these important employability and mobility skills that they really want you to possess. We've also seen a big increase in applications for master's courses as well. In some cases, some subjects, for example, environmental is a good example. There have been huge increases in the number of people applying for master's courses. This might be the right route for you, but it isn't the right decision for everybody, and you would be investing a huge amount of energy, time, and also money to achieve that master's. So it needs to be the right decision. So if you're at all unsure if that's the right decision for you, I would urge you to talk to a careers consultant and talk through your decision and weigh up the pros and cons of your choices before you commit to that. So that, in a nutshell, is sort of some of the impacts of COVID. Just to sort of give you a bit of background information. I said as well I was going to give you some good news, and I think there is positive news around. And I think it's important to remember that as a graduate, you are not as you're less disadvantaged than many other people in the workforce, and your skills and your qualifications are valued, and there are still plenty of opportunities out there. One thing I wanted to point out in this session is that often when students and graduates come to see us and they're talking about finding a graduate job, what they are actually talking about is a graduate scheme. And back on the previous slide, when I talked about the sort of recruitment declining, the 41% more job applications, what we're talking about there is the select few large employers who take on large numbers of graduates and run formal schemes where you would start at a particular point, it would last for a defined amount of time, and might have rotations into different departments, and it's really seen as a pathway to leadership positions. I think it's important to remember that these sorts of graduate schemes actually only represent a very small part of the graduate market. The sorts of jobs that people go into are far broader than that. So I've said here that it represents around 20% of advertised graduate roles. So if you are only focusing on the formal graduate schemes with the well-known, big, often international businesses, you are limiting your search quite considerably. And there are lots of other opportunities out there as well. Now, tomorrow I'll be talking about the graduate job search at 10:15 tomorrow. And in that session, I'll be going into more detail about how to unearth different vacancies. But I wanted to just touch on this today to give you an idea of some of the alternatives that are out there. Graduate schemes, the formal graduate schemes that get lots and lots of applications, are advertised really widely. So you will have had emails from employers, there'll be brochures, there'll be websites, there'll be events. And because of this, they do attract huge numbers of applications. There is the alternative, or what you should also be considering, are graduate level jobs in any industry. And I think it's also worth considering that a lot of industries do not do these formal schemes. So industries where there are perhaps the creative industries, sort of things like conservation, charities, a lot of public sector, they don't run big, expensive formal graduate schemes, but there are still lots of opportunities for graduates. So if you miss out the other graduate level jobs, then you are missing out on a huge amount of the market. The graduate level jobs as well are just ones that may be advertised on Grad Futures, they might be on LinkedIn, they might be on Prospects or Target. So they can be advertised in all sorts of places. They might not be advertised at all. So there's a lot of graduate level jobs out there where people have secured them by applying speculatively. So for example, if you take something like the publishing industry, there are a few formal schemes that come under the graduate scheme category, but there's also a lot of graduate jobs, but they often won't really advertise these because they don't need to. They will get lots of speculative applications from graduates and final year students, which gives them enough candidates to make a really good decision. So if you're interested in finding out how to source lots of graduate jobs and have lots of interesting opportunities to apply for, then come along to the session tomorrow and we will go into more detail about that. And just to sort of just to illustrate this really, from the Heriot Watt and alumni network pages on the website, these are all alumni from Heriot Watt University who have moved into graduate jobs, graduate level jobs, but have not gone through the formal graduate schemes. So some really fantastic sort of outcomes there, and I thought it would be interesting to just see some examples of some of the things that our graduates go and do. It is a competitive market. However, we are still getting opportunities onto our system every day of the week, and there are still plenty of growth areas, both in sort of areas of business and commercial areas, in areas of sort of infrastructure and engineering, also in the creative and arts areas as things start to open up again. If you are finding it difficult to sort of identify places where you can apply and you're not finding enough vacancies to apply for, I'd really urge you to talk to your careers consultant, because they can give you a lot of help around how to manage your job search and how to be creative with your job search. So just back to what employers want, because I think that's one of the questions that we ask ourselves when we're leaving university. Do I have what they want? And what is it that they're looking for anyway? And essentially, it's a combination of things that employers will want. Yes, they want your degree and your education, but as UCAS says here, employers are looking for a mix of technical ability, and by technical that could be developing databases, calculating coordinates, or writing reports, but also these soft skills. So remember what I was saying about mobility skills, and these human skills such as teamwork, communication, leadership, and commercial awareness. And I think that sums it up quite nicely, that employers are just as interested in those personal attributes and skills that you possess, as well as the content of your degree and your degree results. So it is a combination of things. Of course, they're interested in experience as well, and presenting that effectively is also part of the package. But I've just listed a few of the skills that employers will value, but it's not a complete comprehensive list of everything that employers want. So, where do you take all this information? I hope that's given you a little bit of background and a bit of an introduction to to the world of work and what you can expect moving on. So what you need to do next, well, first of all, I would urge you to watch or rewatch the session from this morning on radical resilience, and be able to take a confident and proactive approach. Appreciate your value, and do focus on your strengths and the things that you have to offer, and that will take you a long way in the process. Also, be flexible in your job search. So as we've seen, it can be very competitive out there, but by being flexible and creative in your job search, you will be able to identify opportunities that other people do not, and you'll be able to give yourself the best chance. And remember that your first role from university might not be the perfect one, but think in terms of sort of short, medium and long-term goals. Is this first position taking you in the right direction? Will it give you skills that will help you to then move somewhere else? The days when we start on one pathway and just continue on that for the rest of our lives until we retire, those days really have gone. And it's a much more flexible framework now around careers. So you will move from one thing to another in greatest likelihood. Be smart in your job search. Make sure you're equipped with the right skills and tools and resources that you need. Goes without saying, come along to our bootcamp events and have a look on Grad Futures, and you'll be able to book into any sessions. And finally, make sure you have really appreciated the value of what you've got from university, because it will really help you when you move into that first position after graduation, and think more about your skills. And on that note, I'm going to hand over to Lindsay. If there's any questions, please do put questions in if you have any. Okay, Lindsay, right, over to you. Do you want me to stop sharing my slides and you can share yours?
I'm hoping that my slides have maybe come up without you having
Yes,
to do
they
that.
have.
Could you let me know if you can see them?
Yep, can do.
I'm hoping that everyone can see my slides just now. Could everyone someone just put a yes, if so, in the chat box? That would be amazing. Yes, we can see them. Fantastic. Well, as Sarah was saying, I'm going to be taking on the next part of this session, which is really about it following on from what Kirsty was talking about this morning, if some of you managed to come along to that, but also tapping into what Sarah was saying in terms of the current job market and the fact that there are a lot of opportunities that are out there for graduates, but we're recognising the competition that is also out there as well, and how we can best sell ourselves to really get to those jobs where our fit exists. But also it's about taking that step back and understanding, well, how do we recognise where our fit actually lies? So I'm going to be going through that with you over the next half an hour. Likewise, as Sarah said, if you have any questions at all throughout this presentation, please don't hesitate to note them in the chat function, and we'll certainly respond to those. So this session is really going to be thinking about your skills and qualities. And again, Kirsty Holst mentioned this morning when she was talking about building that confidence, building that resilience in these particularly uncertain times. So it is about recognising that value. It is about really taking a good inside look at yourself to understand what you're good at. And I think that can be really quite a difficult process, but I'll talk you through some of the steps that will allow you to recognise and to then provide the evidence that you have these particular skills and qualities. Now, the reason that this is so important is as Kirsty mentioned this morning, is that confidence that it allows you to develop by understanding, you know, I do have a lot of really great strengths, really great skills and qualities that I can take to a role. But if we want to also think about further down that application pathway, thinking about from the employer's point of view, thinking about the job that they have in trying to sift through all of these initial applications, they are looking for people to be able to articulate what their skills and qualities are that are particularly relevant to that job, so that you're showing the employer that you can do what they're asking for you, what they want you to do, as well as being the type of person that they want within their team. So going through this process is incredibly important. And this is the first part of the career planning process itself. There are 4 different aspects to this. It's very much a circular process, and I would say really do keep this in mind as you're progressing through your career journey. As Sarah said earlier, there's no linear route anymore to get into a job. It's very flexible. People take many different pathways. And throughout working life, I think people change their career on average round about 6 times. So if we are wanting to make those moves, whether those are lateral, as in possibly moving to progression and promotion, or it's maybe about thinking, do you know, I'm not entirely too sure whether this is the type of pathway I want to be taking, we can use these guidelines to really help us manage that process, to understand where our next best step is. And that might be understanding where your existing skills and qualities lie, and then trying to find out for that job that we would ideally like to get to, what are the different steps that I need to be taking? What skills do I need to continue to build and develop in order to allow me to get to that point? So again, it will help you to recognise where your fit lies, give you that confidence, but also help you to navigate your way through your career journey. So as I said, first and foremost, the first part of this career planning process is all about self-awareness. And that comes down to really understanding who you are. By doing that, we can recognise where we value to our role, but we can then also articulate that to the employer as we move through the application process. I will talk a little bit about this in the next slide, but I just want to also tell you a bit more about that process so we can see how each point of it actually links into the next stage. So let's assume that we've gone through the exercises that I will be talking about shortly, which have allowed you to recognise what your key skills, your key strengths actually are. And as Sarah said as well, it is about those technical skills, the technical knowledge that you have developed at university, but it's also those transferable, the mobility skills or professional skills, as we like to call them as well. These skills that are really going to allow you to really work effectively, regardless of the role or regardless of the sector or industry that you want to be working within. So we've now got an understanding, let's assume, where we are really going to be able to drive forward an organisation by understanding skills that we can take forward. By doing that, we then can look at the different opportunities by using the enormous number of resources that are out there, including the support that we can provide you at Careers and Graduate Futures. But we can look to understand, well, what are the sorts of opportunities, for instance, that people from my programme of study have gone into. We can look at the different opportunities that exist within that sort of package of options that may be available to you. But what I would say as a side is, don't feel that you are restricted and that there is only a certain number of opportunities that are open to you and that you're dictated to by your programme of study. And again, we'll talk about how we can kind of open that up. But initially, let's just look at what we could be doing through the studies that we have just completed recently. We can then look at the individual job roles that might be open to us, and we can start to understand about the key skills, the key strengths that are required within that role, looking at maybe the day-to-day tasks, the people that you'd be working with, excuse me, and then we can start to identify where that fit may lie. It will also help us to then make a decision about what we're wanting to do further down the line. Does this tap into or allow us to develop and explore and put into practice those key skills that we've identified? Or does it give us that sense of purpose that Sarah was talking about earlier as well? So it'll help us to identify what our priorities are that will then help us to make really confident, informed decisions about moving forward. Once we've done that, once we've recognised our skills, once we've recognised how these fit into the role and the employer that we're interested in working with, excuse me, we can then move forward with the application process and think about how we can best articulate these and sell ourselves to the employer. And we will go through these different aspects throughout the series of events that we have running this week. As Sarah said, you're going to be talking about the graduate job search tomorrow. So really understanding, tapping into that opportunity awareness, thinking about where we can actually get a hold of current advertised vacancies, but also thinking about this speculative application when you are approaching organisations directly. And then we will be thinking, I think we've got a speaker tomorrow that will be talking about your personal branding as well. So really thinking again about how you can sell yourself. So this session is really going to help to inform you about the different sessions that follow as well. So let's go back to that first stage, that self-awareness, that all-important stage that is then going to help to inform all the others that follow from that. What I'd like to do though is, head there, I want you to think about, well, what is self-awareness? And as I said, yes, it's about understanding your strengths. So it's about thinking about what you can give to an employer, but it's also about thinking what you can get back. And again, it's about what is important to you. But we also want to think about that wider environment that we want to be working within. So I would be saying to you, if we're considering moving forward with this self-awareness exercise, try to break it up into 3 tangible sections. First being what you can sell, what you can give to an employer, what are they are actually looking for, but also what you're wanting to get back from that job as well. So we're thinking about things like values. We're thinking about what's going to motivate you on a day-to-day basis. What's going to make you want to jump out of bed in the morning and give 120% to this particular role? But equally, let's, as I said, think about that wider environment. Think about the type of people that you'd be wanting to work with, or the type of organisation, and again, what they are working towards. Maybe even where they're based. Location, for instance, might be something that is important to you. But you may already have your own interests within a particular sector or industry that you'd be keen to explore. So it's really important that we do consider that wider environment, taking into account our skills, our interests, our experience and qualifications, as well as what we are looking to get back from that role. Now, it's all very well for me to say, think about your skills, really try to understand what you can be articulating to an employer. But I think prior to that, we need to be really understanding, well, what actually is a skill? And you may have heard us talking about skills and qualities and thought, I'm not entirely too sure what the difference between these two terms actually are. Now, a skill is something that can be learned. And again, this was spoken about in the earlier session today. So it's something that you can acquire. It's something that you can build on and you can develop. So thinking about the technical skills that you have been learning at university, but also about those softer skills that you've been developing as well, for instance, through project work, working as part of a team, being able to manage your time, and so on and so forth. And you will have been developing these sorts of skills in other experiences as well. So I would always encourage you to think about all the different types of experiences that you've been involved in, and really try to break that down to understand throughout those processes, throughout the different activities and tasks that I've been involved in, what have I had to develop? Now, thinking about that, on the flip side of it, a quality is not something you can actually learn, but it's something that is inherent to you. It's something almost that you've been born with. So it's those really strong characteristics that we're really wanting to consider. And again, these are the things that are going to help to set you apart from all of these other candidates. But it's about recognising the importance of where these qualities, such as honesty, such as integrity, that really do add value to particular roles, and which employers do see as being incredibly important to working within their environment. Now, I just want to give you a quick resource to draw on as well. You may not be able to see the exact address for this particular resource, but it's on Target Jobs, which is a fantastic graduate or higher education resource that's focused towards careers information for students in higher education. And one of the sections it has on there is all about skills and competencies that graduates have developed and that employers are looking for. But in understanding these skills, we do need to recognise what they really mean. When we talk about communication skills, that can comprise a whole list of different aspects. We could be thinking about written communication skills. We can be thinking about verbal communication skills. So in written, we might be thinking, well, how can we take something that's quite complicated, considering the audience that might be reading this particular material? What's their current knowledge, and do we have to scale this back to make it more understandable or more user friendly? So really trying to think about those written skills that will really support the client's needs. Or it could be that you're having to work with large groups, or you're possibly having to present in large groups, and those particular skills that are aligned with that. But in addition to communication skills, listening skills are so important, and it's about being that active, effective listener. So although from a broad sense we might think our communication skills are great, there are so many different parts of that that we can be breaking down that are going to be particularly suitable to different roles that we might be interested in. So I'd certainly use that as a starting point to get you to help to understand what skills are, what is most important to employers. And again, Sarah touched on this earlier, but about really pulling all of that to life and understanding what these mean from your point of view. So I hope that'll be quite a useful resource for you. So we spoke about the part that self-awareness plays within the career planning process itself. And I'd like to give you just a few practical ways to try to drill down where your skills actually lie at the moment, but also thinking about the fact that you may be trying to get to a particular point, but you may not be thinking that your skills are adequately developed to allow you to enter it at this point in time. So the skills audits that we're going to be talking about will really help you to understand where your current skill set lies, to help you to articulate to an employer at this point the skills that you actually have that are going to be valuable to them. But it also will help you to identify development needs. I don't like the word weaknesses, and I know that for a lot of people this is one of the fears that strikes into them about these questions that employers may ask about, well, what are your weaknesses? And it's not a way of tripping you up, but it's about finding out your attitude to really addressing these particular weaknesses. So that's why I like to think about them as development needs. So do think about these strengths within the next process that we're going to be discussing, but think about those areas that you could possibly use to build on and that will allow you to get to the particular point you're interested in. And again, Sarah mentioned about resources like LinkedIn Learning. As students of Heriot-Watt University, you have free access to LinkedIn Learning, and there are so many really useful courses or learning pathways that will allow you to possibly develop the skills that you might not have quite at the level that particular employers may be looking for. So always see the opportunities that do exist. So skills audits, as I said, really allow you to identify what you have by reflecting on prior past experiences. So we really do want to be thinking about everything that you've been involved in, thinking about your uni work, thinking about any volunteering, thinking about extracurricular activities, and thinking about any part-time work, everything that has allowed you to develop essential skills that are going to help you to move forward. And as I said, it will also help you to understand about these areas that you may want to build on and develop further. But because we're pulling out your skills, we're considering how you've developed these against your prior experiences. These really help us to form a basis to any future CVs or applications that we want to complete. Bearing in mind, an employer will have a set of competencies that they'll be looking for applicants to meet, but they don't just want you to say that you have a particular skill set. They want you to show them through evidence. So this skills audit is so beneficial in many different ways, regardless of the point that you're at within that career planning process that we spoke about earlier. So there are 3 different ways that you can be conducting a skills audit depending on your own learning style. But what I'd like to do is really try to put into context what I was talking about there, and thinking particularly about the skills and the CV and how we really match those skills to make sure our CV is tailored, or in fact understanding about roles that we may be wanting to get into further down the line, but recognizing those development needs and the additional steps that we need to be taking in order to get to the point that we're wanting to get to. So again, this might not be a very clear job description here, but it's one for a research officer. And this is a standard job advert that you see, in the sense that they give you an overview of the organisation. They will talk to you about what their mission, what they're hoping to achieve. They'll talk about the job itself and the sorts of tasks that you'll be involved in, but they'll also talk about the type of person that would be ideal for this particular post, understanding the tasks, understanding the skills that are necessary to fulfill these tasks. So even just from a job advert, we can gain so much information. Again, regardless of whether the point that we're at within our career journey, we can use job adverts to understand about what an employer is looking for and what more that we can be doing to really get to that point, but equally understanding what an employer will be assessing us against when they are looking at filtering down those initial CVs. So just to show you, I went through this particular job advert, and again, it's not very clear, but it just gives you a sense of that key information that employers do give you in terms of allowing you to understand what they're looking for, and to get you to reflect on all of these different skills and to consider where you have developed these skills, or where indeed you may need to develop these even further. So there are so many resources out there. As we've already spoken about target jobs, prospects.ac.uk is another fantastic resource, particularly focused towards students in higher education. And it has a lot of information on different sectors, industries, but also particular job profiles. So in addition to looking at jobs that are being advertised, there are resources out there that do still allow you to get a good insight into particular roles and what skills an employer would be looking for. So let's assume that we've maybe gathered some of that information already. We've maybe got a bit of an understanding about potentially the area we would want to be going into. But if not, if you're still feeling kind of lost where you're wanting to move to, this is still going to be a really useful exercise for you, again, to build up that confidence and allow you to recognise where your skills and strengths do lie. So as I said, there are 3 different styles that you may want to consider when conducting your own skills audit. So first one I'm going to talk about is a checklist. The second one is a tabular skills audit, and the third is a visual or a word cloud audit. And again, you'll have your own preference into what works best for you. A checklist is really about you considering all the different skills that you may have, but really looking deeper into them and thinking, well, what does this actually mean? Where do I stand on this skill at the moment? And what can I be doing to really increase how good we are with this particular skill, but understanding possibly how important this skill is within the bigger picture and the type of role or employer that we're wanting to work with. Now, again, as I said, it can be quite difficult to think about the different skills that may exist. So I've pulled together just a few examples of what these may be, but also broken them down into what they mean. So we mentioned about communication earlier. But if we look there about creative thinking, yes, it's about coming up with innovative ideas. It's also about these devising new creative ways to tackle existing problems. And this is really important to employers as well. It's about really trying to move things forward and really trying to continue to grow and meet the needs and demands of customers and clients. It's about thinking outside of the box. It's about really being creative and thinking, coming up with new ideas that no one has really considered previously. So it is about, yes, I feel that I have these skills, but in practice, what does this actually mean? So again, this might be quite a starting point for you in order to help you to identify those particular skills. So again, back to the checklist here, what I would be saying to you is consider these different softer skills, but also consider clearly the technical skills that may be related to the area that you're wanting to go into. Now that's quite easy for those that are maybe on a vocational focused programme of study, like engineering, for instance. For those more maybe subjects like psychology, for instance, you are developing so many skills that are really going to be applicable across any industry that you go into. So yes, let's think about those kind of transferable skills, but we're also thinking about the critical skills, the evaluation skills, the research skills that you've been developing within those areas, as well as the knowledge. So let's consider all the different experiences and the skills that we've developed, but think about assessing where you sit on a particular scale. And I'm suggesting a scale of 1 to 5 here, where 1 is very minimal knowledge, up to 5, where you feel you've really got that knowledge that an employer would be looking for. And do be as honest as possible, but do give yourself some credit for what you are learning. Now, I've just had a message to say that my connection is quite poor right now. I'm really sorry if that is the case. I will continue, but again, if anyone has got any questions, please don't hesitate to note them down. So this is our checklist, thinking about the skills we have, where we are at the moment, but also about where we would like to be further down the line. So let's move on to our next one. I'm conscious of the time here, and I do tend to rabble on quite a bit, so apologies for that. But our second type of audit is called a tabular audit, and that works in a similar way to the checklist. However, it's with more of a focus on the different activities that you have been involved in. So I'll give you a bit of an example about what this might look like. So let's think about all the different experiences, the activities that you've had, and then consider each one independently and think about all the different tasks that you've been involved in and the skills that those have developed. So if we're thinking about your university programme, we've put down ideas such as effectively explaining, supporting and defending my own ideas and opinions in seminars. Again, thinking about how this is important to an employer. If we're thinking about what we mentioned earlier about those creative ideas, those innovative suggestions for moving forward, you need to be able to back that up. You need to be able to explain your thought process, but also really defending yourself against those who may have other opinions. So again, everything that you're doing at university, although you might not recognise it at this moment in time, is going to be really important for you within the workplace. So I would say really do try to break all of these different activities that you've been involved in down to that fine level to help you to understand where your skill set does actually lie and what this means. So as we put down there, effectively explaining, supporting and defending my own ideas. So we've thought about the activity, we've thought about the individual tasks that are involved in that, but then what these may mean. So it's about those communication skills, the verbal and the written. But I'd also add in another one there about negotiation skills as well when we're thinking about defending your own ideas. So again, a really useful exercise, particularly maybe if you're feeling a bit lost with where do I start, let's maybe focus then on our different experiences. The third one is I myself am very much a visual learner. I like to see things in front of me in sort of diagrammatical form. So this is another example that might be of more preference to particular individuals. And again, it's about thinking about those individual experiences that you've had. And then from that, thinking about the different skills that you have been developing. So almost seeing them in isolation initially, thinking about everything that you've been involved in and these key skills that you've managed to develop through that. And through these different activities, it's going to help us to build that confidence, to recognise where our skills lie, to be able to then move to that next stage within the career planning process about exploring opportunities and starting to identify the fit between, okay, well, I've got project management skills, I've got teamwork and leadership skills, I've also got really great IT skills and data management. So where do these sorts of skills fit in terms of potentially some of the opportunities and options that are available to me? But I'd just like to kind of reiterate that as a graduate from university, you are developing so many different skills. And if we think earlier to what Sarah was talking about in terms of particularly graduate training schemes, then most of them do advertise that they are open to students from any discipline. And this is because they recognise the abundance of skills that you're developing simply by being a student at university. So this particular infographic I stole from my colleague Keith, who will be chatting to you further into this week. But I think it's a really good way to really showcase how important these softer skills that you are developing actually are. So we can see almost 25% of our full skill set is that technical excellence that we are building up or have developed through our university. But we're thinking also about that quality of thinking. It's about that capacity to learn. We know, particularly in this day point in time, that capacity to learn, to take on new information and to evolve is really important. Sarah mentioned that earlier. But it's also about using that knowledge and being able to apply it in a really effective way. It's also about wanting to give your best. So that passion to excel is really important. It's that drive for excellence. It's wanting to continue to build up your knowledge and learning so that you can apply that to really help the organisation. And thinking about that bigger picture, not just about your role in silo to the organisation, but how it really adds value to the success of the organisation. It's also being able to adapt, and adaptability, as we know at this point in time, is so important. We think about the way that organisations have to really quickly adapt to the social distancing and being able to transfer their working to online. So that adaptability is really important. And again, this year has been really difficult for you, but it's allowed you to develop so many of those skills. You've been forced to face these challenges and address them. But from the other side of that, it's allowed you to develop really great skills, which are going to help you to succeed within the workplace. And it's also about relating to people as well, being able to work with your teammates, being able to really interact with clients and customers, or maybe those that are working within an interdisciplinary nature. So it's about communicating, it's about influencing, and also building those successful relationships. So I'm not going to mention too much about career planning. It was really just about getting you to reflect on what I've spoken about in terms of the importance of identifying your skills, but then how that fits into the other stages that follow within the career planning process. So what I would be saying to you in terms of moving forward is, again, the way that we've structured these career sessions is about moving from one step to the next. So I would be encouraging you to sign up to the sessions that we have running tomorrow, which are on graduate job search and also about you and your personal brand. And then we have other opportunities further down the line for you to find out about applications and CVs. We've also got a lot of information on our Grad Futures platform, as well as our Careers and Graduate Futures website. The link for that is at the bottom of each of these slides. And I would encourage you to start to research the industries that you are interested in. I mentioned a few of the resources that are out there that would be useful to you just now, but also think about professional associations or societies that you're affiliated to as well. But network, please do not please do not underestimate the importance of networking. It's really, really important in order for you to understand about different opportunities that exist. And LinkedIn was mentioned earlier as well. It's about building those connections to open up potentially opportunities and develop relationships. But there's also so much information that you can gain from LinkedIn by looking at the different pathways that others have taken who've maybe come from a similar background. But I also encourage you to book an appointment with your careers advisor as well. We can help you at every step of the way, whether that's signposting to resources or really helping you with that active stage of completing CVs or preparing for interviews and so on. So I'm really sorry I've kept you quite late now. I do apologise for that. But I hope that's given you good insight into your next steps. It's given you a bit more understanding of what career planning actually involves. It's helped you to differentiate between skills and qualities to allow you to really then identify your own through different practical strategies. So I hope that's been really useful to you all. If anyone has any questions, and I believe that there are a few that have come through as I've been chatting, then please continue to post them. That would be great. Let me see if we have particular questions here. Is LinkedIn Learning available for us even after we graduate from Heriot-Watt? That's a very good question. It's something that I'm going to have to look into actually. That's something that we can certainly get back to you about, but it's not an answer I can give you at this point. I'm really sorry. Although Sarah did answer that with a similar answer, but there are other resources out there that would also be really valuable. Any other questions at all?
I think Keith asked a question earlier about you sort of thinking about your strategy once you leave university, and it can feel as though there's a sort of emphasis on moving into your first sort of big permanent long-term job. But often people do move into short-term jobs to gain some experience, and that's absolutely fine as well. So the job search process doesn't need to just be sort of focused on the long term. I would really urge you, especially in a slightly unpredictable employment market, to look at all the options and consider how you can build your experience and the skills that Lindsay's been talking about, so you can then move on to the next stage. So certainly I've been working with graduates recently who have started in one area and are now thinking about pivoting into a different area, perhaps after a year after graduation. They're now applying for those big graduate schemes that I was talking about. So there's lots of different patterns. There's no right or wrong way to do it. But this is why if you make an appointment with a careers consultant, we can help you work through those options and really weigh up the pros and cons of all of these different possibilities.
Absolutely. And again, I must apologise. I think my network connection has dropped and it's automatically switching off my video. So I'm not being rude. It's just I'm losing control of these sorts of things. But absolutely, as Sarah said, it is about thinking about the short term, the immediate term, and the longer term as well, and what you can be doing to really help yourself to move forward to get to that point that really does allow you to develop yourself and to give you that sense of purpose that you're really looking for.
Right. And from this session, you will have got a stronger understanding of what you're likely to face when you're moving into the world of work, and also of the importance of skills and understanding that. So that will really give you a good sort of standing point for then moving on to tomorrow's sessions, when we'll be looking in more detail about how you start to present yourself in the workforce, but also how you navigate that job market as well. So if there's no further questions, we will stop there. Thanks very much for coming, everyone, and really looking forward to seeing you at more bootcamp sessions tomorrow. have a look on Grad Futures, because there's also a whole raft of sessions being offered by our colleagues in Dubai, which are specifically geared up to the Dubai and Middle East market as well. Anything else, Lindsay, before we finish?
Sorry, you caught me just taking a gulp of water there. No, I'd just like to thank everyone again for coming along, and I hope you've gained some knowledge from that that's really going to help you to move forward. But as Sarah said, please don't hesitate in booking in for an appointment with any of us. We'll do everything that we can to really help you to understand your current position and to help you to move forward from that.
Great. And all those ideas about auditing your skills and understanding your skills more and the employer's perspective, all these slides in this talk will be available on the recording, and we'll get a link out to you this afternoon. Thanks very much, folks.
Thank you, everyone.